G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza, and in this video tutorial we're going to be taking the static environment image that was created by artist JosihuaNel on DeviantArt. The link to his work is in the description. And we're going to be turning it into this. We're going to be making some alterations and turning it into an animated scene, an environment. And so through this tutorial, the things I'm going to be covering are, first of all, the figure. We're going to be looking at making that small animated loop where his hair and cloak kind of wave in the wind. Then we're going to be doing the rain falling, then the rain droplets on the ground. Then we're going to be adding a reflection to add wetness to the ground, and then finally adding fog to the foreground and the background. So let's get started. What I'm going to be doing is using this as a base to create some environmental animation. So I've created this character here. I've just kind of plonked him in there. He's got a bit of a shadow. He's got a backlight because the lamp is there. And so you can see that he's kind of part of that scene. And I'm going to do a few things to make this static image come to life with some environment animation. Now, I'll go through them with you now before I jump into it. The first thing I'm going to do is animate the man very slightly. Now, it's not going to be intense animation. It's going to be environmental. So I'm going to have two things animated. First, his hair, just very light hair motion. And second, I'm going to add a coat, which will have just some light animation. I'm going to go into this clip here. And this is the dude I have set up. Now, as you can see, he has no hair and he has no coat. That was intentional. That was so I can lock those layers and go into animating them without affecting the things that I've done already. So I'm going to zoom in to 1000%. And I'm going to draw the first part of his hair, the base of his hair. And it might look something like this. Okay, so now the bottom doesn't have to be very pretty because in the end it's going to be following into that shadow. Okay, so that's the base that I have for the hair. So I'm going to add on a layer on top of that, this yellow glow. Just kind of outline the edges like this. Okay, so that is my hair. Now I can check this out by hitting Control-Enter to test it, and I'll zoom in, and I'm pretty happy with that. That's the look I want. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the coat. So I'm going to create two layers in the bottom here. The first one will be that very dark near black color, and I'll let's see, have the coat something like that. I think that's a bit too wide. I'll bring it in a bit. So like that, angle it. Okay, I'm quite happy with the result there. And then on the layer on top of that, using the yellow, I'm just going to do the highlight on two edges. This edge here, it's quite hard to draw it so it follows it accurately. And then this edge along here. Okay, so now if I unhide those wireframes, you can see that I've created that coat look. I'll zoom in here, just so you can get a good look at him in his environment. So he's got the light reflecting on the edges there, and he's quite a hard to see figure. So I'm happy with that. Now the next step is animating it. So I'm going to show you with the hair first, and I'm going to fast forward through the process after I show you how I'm going to go about it. So I might have, let's say, 10 frames in this animation. So what I do is somewhere in the middle, create a new keyframe on both of these. And on the layer with the hair, I use the onion skin tool. I turn that on and show the frame before, and then I draw an alternate version of the hair. Like this. Okay, so as you can see, and I'm going to zoom right in here so you can see what I've done. Oops. So I really haven't changed it dramatically. That's the difference there. It's not a huge difference. In fact, 10 frames of animation might be far too much. I might just copy these frames and turn it into 5 frames of animation. Actually, no, I'll leave it as 10 because the coat will need more frames. just kind of figuring things out as I go along. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is to do the in-between. So I hit F7 between these two areas, and I've dragged out my onion skin to show the frame before and after, and I draw the shape so that it is exactly halfway between these two. See what I did? See how it goes between them? Now I can drag this one across, do the same thing twice more. So drawing the in-between like that. You've got to be careful because these are quite subtle in between, so you want to make sure that you get the subtleties captured. Okay. And I'm happy with that. So as you can see, I've got that animation starting, and I'm just going to copy and paste those frames in reverse, like this. Hang on. That one goes there. That one goes there. That one goes there. Okay, and I'm going to turn these into doubles, like this. By hitting F5, I give them extra frame space. Okay, so now it's 16 frames long. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. And the last thing I want to do in animating the hair is do that yellow glow. So on each frame, I'm going to select that yellow. I'm just going to go through and outline the same area, but follow the outline. Like that. I'll need a thicker brush. Okay, so I'm going to go continue through and do that to finish the hair, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the coat back. So I'll do the in-betweens and the keyframes of the coat, and then the outlines, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, so we've finished this, and I'll just go through what I've done. As you can see through the fast forward, it was pretty much the same thing, where the coat layer and the hair layer just kind of had about 5 new frames created, and then those frames were copied and pasted in reverse. So it's kind of a back and forth. So if I just show the coat, we see it go up and then back down. So it's very minimalistic. And then when I hit Control Enter to test it, you can see that it ends up adding a bit of atmosphere. So we feel like this street has a bit of wind, a bit of a breeze going on, which is really cool because that sets us up for the rest of it feeling really dynamic. So we've done our character. So the next thing we're going to do, like I said, is create some rain. Now I'm going to have this rain fall completely vertically, and then if I want to, I'll be able to muck around with the skewing and find if I want it to tilt or anything like that. So first things first, I'm going to create just a rectangle. Let me see how big I want to make this. Like this big. And I'm going to convert this to a symbol. I'm going to call it falling rain. Hit enter. I'm going to move the pivot point down here by this bottom, because that way when I skew, it anchors there, and that'll come in useful later. So now I'll enter this clip, and I'm just going to turn this layer into a guide and remove the alpha, let's say to 30%, just so we can kind of see something. I'll just hit right click on the layer and hit guide, and that makes it so that if I hit Control Enter to test it, you don't see anything. So this guide layer is purely only visible when I'm doing this animation stuff in Flash. So the next thing I'm going to do is find a gradient that I like. So if I just hit this base gradient, you can see, okay, so it's all angled directly across now. So I'm going to paint it so that there we go, that's what I want. Okay, so I've drawn a gradient, and so that way with every line I draw, that gradient is in the same direction. Now I need to find a good, what do you call it? You know, gradient. I'm just talking crap now. Okay, so with the black end, the dark end, I'm going to make that white, and I'm going to bring the alpha to 0%. So now we have this kind of gradiented white thing. And I'm going to pull that 0% alpha in, and I'm going to make this end at about, let's say 70%. And then very near that, I'm going to bring it down to about 30%. And see, what that's done is create a very clear area at the bottom, but have it fade out a lot more quickly. In fact, I might bring that down to 20%, and you'll see what I was going for. I'm going to bring that 70 down to 50%, because you want it to be fairly subtle. You don't want it to be over the top. Okay, so what my next step is, I'm to draw, I'm to draw the lines that the rain is going to follow, like this. Okay, so I've selected quite a thin brush, and I'm getting it to go really straight because, and I mean, inevitably someone's going to ask this, so I might as well tell you now rather than in the comments. I'm getting it to go really straight by holding shift, and then the direction I flick it in, it locks it to. So if I were going horizontally, notice even if my mouse goes up and down, it locks it along that horizontal axis. So I'm doing the same, and you just got to make sure it's going in the right direction. Okay, so I'm just making sure to keep all the droplets within my guide, and already that feels like a good rain look. Cool. So next thing I'm going to do is hit F7, and I'm going to, right next to this onion skin, you can see how if I hit onion skin, it's way too faint. So I'm instead going to use onion skin outlines, and we can see very clearly where the raindrops are. And so in this next frame, I'm going to draw the raindrops flicking up, but from lower. And what this does is, frame by frame, enables me to give this rain consistent motion. If we do it too randomly, it will look a bit too chaotic. It won't look very neat. Okay. So aside from doing that, have some of them disappear and then create new ones at random, like this. Now, same thing, new frame, and all of a sudden I've got new ones to follow. Now I've completely left this area empty, so I'll add a few, and then we continue. Same thing, I'll add a few up the top here. Let this go down. Now, because I want it to look quite chaotic, I don't have to do too many of these frames. I'm thinking about 5. So I'm on my 3rd one at the moment. Remember to add a few up the top, new ones. And it doesn't have to follow it exactly. And we can use the other frame as a reference, kind of hopping between it back and forth. And then throw in a few random ones as well. Okay, so already that's starting to look quite good. Let's give it, how many more? I wonder. I could do this on doubles as well, so it's a bit more consistent. I'm not sure. It's the kind of thing that you sort of got to improvise as well. it's pretty easy to kind of go through. It's just a little bit time consuming, so I don't want to bore you too much. I'll just flick through it and then we'll go through to do some other stuff. Okay, I'm happy with that. Do a few random ones and I want to see what that looks like. Now in Flash CS6, I think you can do it in CS5 as well. There's a button here which is the loop button, and so when I set that up I can then hit enter and watch it loop, and that looks quite good to me. Now I'm going to try and do it on doubles and just see what it looks like, extend the loop and then watch it. Okay, so it's not very smooth, so I'll undo that. I preferred it on singles, that's good to know, and I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to convert this back guide. In fact, no, I'm not going to convert it to anything. I'm just going to delete it because I don't need it anymore. I have rain. There we go. I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's test this. I'm going to hit Control Enter. Okay. Now it's not looking very good to me. What does it look like on doubles? That's a bit better. Yeah, I'll keep it on doubles. Okay, so I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to reuse this rain clip in a few ways. First of all, I'll name my layers. So I'll call this layer figure. I'll call this layer background, just so that anyone who uses the reference file can kind of go through that and understand where things are. And I'll call this rain 1. Then I'm going to, on the layer above it, I'm going to call this rain 2, and I'm going to expand it and widen it so that it fills most of the screen. And now I'm going to watch that. Okay, so you can see how we filled more of the screen there. I'm quite happy with that, and I'm going to give this front one a motion blur. So under filters, I'm going to go new, I'm going to go blur, and in fact I won't go motion blur, I'll just set the blur to 3 wide and 3 tall, and it just kind of makes it look like a bit of a lens effect. I'm going to zoom out and enlarge it. And look at that. I'm quite happy with that. So I've got this rain effect, and then to add a bit more scope, I'm going to I'll rename these. I'll make the front one 1, the middle one 2, and then I'm going to make a further one further away, I should say. Call it 3, and I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it at the back there, and I'll stretch it so it's tall as well. And what I'm also going to do, I've just hid the first 2. I'm just going to copy, paste it, modify, transform, flip horizontal, and then put it in the same area. And that way, we've filled more area with those thin raindrops. And then when I put it together and render it, you can see we've got this really heavy downpour. So I can try 2 things now. We've got the heavy downpour, and I want to try and see what it looks like with a bit of an angle, because we have wind going on with his animation. I want to see if it looks any good with a little bit of wind in the atmosphere. So I'm going to zoom into about 140%, and I'm going to skew the front layer ever so slightly in this direction. In fact, I can probably select all of them at once, skew them, and drag them back in, and watch that. Control Enter. Now, do I prefer that? I think I do. I quite like that. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this figure on top of the rain 3 layer so that he's in front of the distant rain. And I'll render that. Have a look. That's better. Much better. I'm very, very happy with that. Okay, so we've done our rain droplets. The rain falling. I want to do the rain hitting the ground, and I'll show you the simpler way to do that now. I'm going to create a layer on top of the background. I'm going to call this rain hits. Rain hit. I'm going to create a reference area by drawing, I'll lock everything except this layer, by drawing a rectangle and stretching it to the appropriate size. I'm going to hit F8, I'll call it rain hit area, hit enter and enter the clip. I'll make the reference 20% black and then turn the layer into a guide. And as I mentioned before, when I test it, it won't appear in the render. So my next step is to animate a droplet and create lots and lots of these. So I'm going to lock my guide layer because I don't need to mess with that. I'm going to zoom in. Now to create my droplet, let's use a 20% white. What does that look like? That's pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to start off by doing a little circle like that. Okay, I'm going to select that, hit F8, and I'm going to call this Droplet 1. Hit enter. Now I'll enter this clip, make a new frame, make sure my onion skin's on so I can see the frame before. And I'm just going to draw. I'll zoom in so you can see better. This is zoomed in as far as it can go, so don't be afraid to use a bigger brush. Okay, so F7 for a new keyframe. Have it go out. Because it's so faint on the frame before, I'll go into wire onion skin. New frame. A new frame. And then as it spreads out, make the lines thinner and have it break apart like this. And let's give it 2 more like that. So you can see that that's what the droplet looks like. Okay, so that's like a little puddle thing. And I'm going to hit F7 and then go to frame 30 and hit F5. And what that has done has given me this droplet area and frame spacing after it. I'll drag it to frame 25. So I'm quite happy with that. Now I'm going to hop out and quite simply copy and paste. And I'm going to, on my guide layer, create a fully opaque black area over here and then relock that. And I'm going to copy my raindrop and my second raindrop over here so I can see the different raindrops I have. This is going to make sense in a moment because I'm going to right click, duplicate this other raindrop and turn it into droplet 2. I'm going to copy and paste, right click, duplicate, droplet 3, copy paste, right click, duplicate, droplet 4, and then one more time, bring it down. You'll see what I'm doing this for in a moment, and then turn that one to droplet 5. And why I'm doing this is so that I can go into droplet 2, select this whole frame area and drag it over about 5 frames. Done. In droplet, see, that didn't work so much because I lost my reference on the first frame. I'll draw a circle, hit F8, I'll call it droplet area, and I'm going to turn it into a button. Hit OK. Hear me out. I really feel like I've gone way too fast and might have lost some of you, so if you get a bit lost, go back and kind of catch up to where we were. Hopefully you won't get lost again. Anyways, so in this button, I'm going to drag this first frame down onto the hit area. And that means it's not visible at all, but the hit area is only visible in the flash file. Okay, so I use this to create reference areas. So now when I go into the other droplets and drag these droplet frames over to frame 8, 9, on the first frame, I can place that hit area thing. And that enables me to have something to manipulate in the main timeline. Okay, so with each progressive raindrop, so droplet 4, and then finally droplet 5, I'm moving these frames towards the back of the clip. Okay, and I'll show you what this does. Let me in the first clip, let me just paste that hit area. Okay, so if I test this and hit Control Enter, you can see when I zoom in here, see how they drop one after the other? That is these 5 raindrops, and each of them begins the raindrop sequence, as it were, those frames of the raindrop, at a different moment. Now this is important because I want to use all these raindrops. I don't want to use the same one, otherwise they'll all loop at the same time and it doesn't look organic at all. So in doing these 5 variants, I can now copy the first one, hit paste, and just place them randomly throughout until I am happy with how it looks. So don't be too evenly spaced. Some of them can be close together, some of them can be spaced apart. So just be really random about it all. Okay, so done. And now if I wireframe that and create a new layer, I can select this second droplet, go on the new layer, hit paste, and paste the next round. And so on and so forth until eventually we have a ground that's full of all these droplets going off at a different time. Okay, so I've finished placing these dots and I'll show you layer by layer what I've done. On the bottom layer, I have my guide. And so this is done by right-clicking on the layer and setting it to guide, which means that in the actual animation, it won't show as visible. This is just so I can see where I want to place my droplets. On the next layer up, I have all these little dots. Comprised inside of these, the reason I have this blue dot thing is because that's a button with the hit area drawn in, so I can select it on the outside frame. Other than that, it is the droplet animation, as you can see. Okay, so I've on this one layer placed all of these other droplets, which are the same droplet, in these places. I'll wireframe that so you can see all them together, and on the next frame up you can see these other droplets, which is a duplicate of the other clip but with the animation beginning on frame 5, meaning all of these droplets start doing the animation 5 frames later, and so on and so forth, so that the next frame have their different positions. They begin after the orange ones, wireframe the next frame, that's their positions, and they begin animating after the pink ones, and then finally these ones, which animate last after the blue ones. So that's all of them together, and when I go out to the main frame, that's what I see. I see all those little dots, which is fine because those dots aren't visible, as with the guide layer, when I hit Control Enter and render. And when I render, you can see very clearly that what I've done is quite effective. The raindrops are doing their thing. Okay. So I've done my rain falling, I've done my raindrops. I want to do 2 more things. I want to do some smoke and I want to do some reflection. Now while I've done the reflection, done the rain, I might as well do the reflection next because that will be quite simple to do. So I'm going to make a new frame above the background and I'm going to call this reflection. Oops, I'll spell it correctly. Hit enter. I'm going to hide everything. I'm going to copy the background. Actually, no, I won't do that yet. I'm going to draw where I'm going to put the reflection, and that will be like this. So I'm going to, oops, that's not working. I'm going to draw along this wall, down like that. And I'm going to go across here and down that wall, and I'm going to paint that in. So this will be my reflection. I'm going to hit F8. I'm going to call this reflection and I'll make it a movie clip, not a button. Okay. Then I'm going to select my background image on the frame below and copy it. Then I'll go inside this clip. I'm going to make a new layer, hit paste, turn and hit F8, and I'll call this background, and I'm going to flip this upside down like this, but I'll make it a bit shorter. Okay, so now I'm going to put my red layer on top. I'm going to create a mask by right clicking on the top layer and hitting mask. You see what that does is it hides everything except for that area, that red area I've drawn, and where that only shows through the layer underneath. So my next step is I'll wireframe the top layer mask and unlock it, and I'm going to place it so that it mirrors, the top. So I drew the street from those corners, so I'm hoping that that will reflect properly. Okay, so almost everything's quite good except for a few small things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten this even more, and I'm going to fix these few small things. I'm going to go into this clip, right click and break apart. And my next step, I'm going to select this building area. I'm going to skew it down like this. Yeah? And what that does is if I go outside and lock it, you'll see how that's made that angle follow it along. So before, see how here it breaks the perspective? How we have the perspective of, let me just draw it. We have the perspective of these buildings, and in the reflection, it should follow that as well, but we have it breaking it like that. So what I've done on this side is I've skewed it down so it follows that perspective and it looks like a real good reflection. So I'll do the same on this other side so you can see what I'm doing. I'll just select it. Remember to do that to the image, you right click and you select break apart. And then I go out and make sure it follows the perspective. It doesn't yet, so I'll do it a bit more. I'll select that area, skew it down, lock it. No, needs more skewing. Oops. I've got to unlock it. There you go. So I'll get rid of some of that because that's too much area. I'll really warp it down. Let's see how that looks. And we're getting there. In fact, I think that's about it. I'm quite happy with that. So I'll leave it at that. Now when I go out, you can see that I've got this reflection. So if I hide it and reappear it, you can see that it's a pretty effective, simple reflection. Now it's not going to be that strong, but we're just getting the feel of it. Now the second thing I want to do is find my figure. I'm going to copy him, and I'm going to go into my reflection clip, and inside here I'm going to paste him, and I'm going to flip him upside down. So transform, flip vertical. I'm going to put his feet, where his actual feet are. Now problem is, I've got this shadow here that's on his original clip. So I'm going to right click and duplicate him as a copy, and I'm going to delete that layer like that. Simple. That way it removes that shadow but keeps the figure. There we go. So that is a really strong reflection, but that's a mirror-like reflection. I just want it a soft reflection. So by selecting that clip, going over to style, I can go to alpha, and I can change the visibility of it like so. So I'm going to bring it to, I think 40% works, and I'm going to blur it slightly. So in the filters, I'm going to go blur, and I'll blur it at 2. And let's test that. Hit Control Enter. That's looking pretty neat. I think the perspective skew needs to be stronger on the left side, so I'll just go in and change that by selecting this, bringing it in, and let's test that. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's have a look at that. Yes, I'm happy with that. Okay, so that's quite good. I'm going to go out again. I'll make the blur, what does 1 pixel look like? I'll keep it at 1 pixel, and I'll make the alpha of this whole reflection thing at 20%. So it's much softer. So if I hide it and show it, you can see that it's just a light reflection. But with all the rain droplets and all that, it helps make the whole scene look very, very wet. And that's the whole point. And we even have his animation being reflected there as well. So it's really dynamic. So the whole scene is starting to look Really, really dynamic. And the last thing I want to do is animate some smoke. Now I won't do any fancy shape tweens or frame by frame animation. I'll just do a really simple loop and you'll be surprised how effective this is. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show but lock everything. And on the very frontmost layer, I'm going to call this fog. Okay, and in red, just because it's very clear to see, I'm going to draw a solid line straight across, completely straight like that. Now, as I mentioned, to do it completely straight like that, you just hold shift. So I'm going to paint that in, hit V and select the edges and delete it. So we've cut it off so it's I mean, to be honest, I could have just drawn a rectangle, but always the hard way, huh? And now I'm going to add lumps like this. Okay, so that's my cloudy area, my fog area. I'm going to now select a foggy color, like a light gray. I'll for this at 20, oh, that's 10%, maybe 10% works. Yeah, that works. Hit F8 and I'm going to call this fog base. Hit enter. Now, I'm going to create the loop. So I'm going to click and drag it so that it's on the very corner of the image here. And I'm going to hit F8 and I'm going to call this fog loop. Hit enter. So now when I enter this loop, I've just got the one layer with the one movie clip. I'm going to make a new layer, copy and paste that cloud movie clip, and I'll wireframe them both so you can see them really clearly. I'm just going to drag this across so it meets up at the end to end. Okay? And it's got to be exact because we don't want to see the overlay. Okay. So now we've got the two. Let me just show you everything that's going on here. We've got the fog duplicated on two layers, connected perfectly. Okay? And the next thing I'm going to do is go way out here to, let's try frame 600. Select those both and hit F6. And then I'm going to drag this across so that the rightmost cloud lines up perfectly with the bottom left corner. Okay, so that what happens is I'll create a motion tween on both of these, create classic tween, show all, and as you can see, this animates across and you won't be able to differentiate between the two because there is a seamless connection between them. And the cool thing is when this reaches the end here, it will loop seamlessly. So we have an endless looping fog. Okay, so now I think it's a bit too high, so I'm going to lower it down here and I'm going to add a blur. So in filters, I'll add blur and I'll make this a big blur, maybe 20. And show frame. And now when I hit Control, now when I hit Control Enter, I've got the whole scene playing out with the fog going across. I think it's a bit too high still. I'll make it even blurrier, maybe at 30. Hit Enter, Control Enter. That's better. So look at that. We've got the fog going across. I'm very happy with that. I'm going to see what it looks like with some fog along those back streets there. So I'm going to lock that, and along on the layer on top of the background, I'm going to call this back fog. Hit paste because I'd copied these clouds, and I'm going to hit wireframe and have it so that the main fog bit isn't wider than the buildings, but is about the same width between them. And in theory, that will animate through and continue to loop as well, but it's not invisible behind this building. So I'm going to hit F8 with that clip selected, and I'm going to call this fog loop masked. I know this is getting really intense and there's lots of stuff in this tutorial, so it's not for the faint of heart. And then on the layer above it, I'm going to just draw a big old rectangle like that. Then right click on that layer and mask. And what that has done effectively is block off the rest. except for this middle bit. Okay, so I might up the visibility of this back fog. So I'll make the blur 20% and I'll go, I'll duplicate it so it's on top of each other twice, so it's 20%. There we go, and I'm quite happy with that. I think it's still a bit blurry, so I'm going to go in here and I'll select both of these and I'll make it 10%. Let's see what that looks like. It's quite cool. And then I'm going to squash it so it's like a really low sort of fog. Actually, rather than doing that, I'll just bring it down and bring the mask area up. Like this. There we go. So I'm quite happy with that. Control Enter, let's test this. Oh, I'm quite happy with that. And overall, I feel like I am done. So let's recap. I've got, in fact, I'll bring all of this. Okay, so it's all invisible. I've got the background. This is what I started off with. Completely blank slate, all right? Then I created this figure, and inside him did a bit of animation to show some wind, okay? Then the next thing I did was create the falling rain, and I skewed it and laid it so that it's in the very background, it's in the midground, and it's in the foreground with a slight blur, okay? The next thing I did was create the rain hit areas, these droplets here, and then a reflection to reflect this figure and the environment to create a wet look. Finally, the last thing I did was create this fog, which I put in the background and the foreground. And overall, I am really satisfied with the result. So let's look at the difference between the two. That is the scene without any animation. Render this, and it's created a very dynamic looking scene. See? I'm very satisfied with the result. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this tutorial. It has been a bit of a long one, but I hope you've learned a bit. Like I said, it's a bit of an intermediate tutorial because I do kind of rush through some of the things that basics aren't covered by. But hopefully those of you who are somewhat familiar with Flash and at the stage where this is somewhat understandable will get a lot from this. So thank you for joining me. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you later. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy my videos. You can download the reference files from this tutorial by clicking the link in the description. And remember to share any art, animation or game you make on Newgrounds.com. Until next time, see you later.